Now, obviously, the easiest way to not get bullied in prison is not go to prison at all. But for those of us who find ourselves there, then sometimes it can end up being a fact that you get bullied. Now, when I first went to prison, I was small. I was just turned 18. I'd never really had a fight outside of school. I'd never really encountered bullies in my day-to-day life, as you don't really outside of school. And even when I'd been bullied in school, it'd only been quite fleeting. It hadn't really been that bad. It had just, been getting picked on for a couple of weeks maybe, and then, the bully quickly lost their attention to me and went off elsewhere. So it wasn't something I'd really had too much experience of in my life. Now, when I went to prison when I was 18, like I say, I wasn't a big lad. I hadn't really had to deal with this sort of thing before. You can quite easily go through prison, and many people will probably listen to this and think that, it's a bit soft and they went through prison with no problems at all now. And that could be true for 98% of people. It's just that when you fall into the radar of a bully, so either if you're weak or if you're you just happen to be in the cell opposite one and they see you in the morning and they decide to pick on you, that's as unlucky as you could be sometimes. So I mean, I did get bullied in prison. I'm not ashamed to say that it did happen to me. It happened to me multiple times with multiple different people because I was a bit of a victim when I started out. I remember when I started doing this podcast, and I did an interview for someone, and I kind of glossed over all the bad bits of it, but we did touch on some of the downsides, and that made me really kind of think. I wanted to do a diary of my time in prison, and as soon as I went back to the beginning, I realised that actually, Portland prison was a terrible time for me, and there was very little of it that was very good at all. It wasn't until later on when I went to Dartmoor that I started thriving in prison and actually doing well. So I'd kind of glossed over large parts of it in my mind, and when I started digging through my time at Portland, I realised that it was a horrible time there, and I'd repressed the fact that I'd been bullied through quite a lot of it. So here's my experience of bullies and possibly how I could have done things differently to not get picked on. So the first bully I always remember, and I'll never be afraid to name him, is a guy named Fitzpatrick, a skinny lad. Now, he couldn't have been older than 21 because we're all under 21s in there. We're in the 18 to 21 bracket. And he came over to me in the exercise yard and took my canteen off me and rummaged through it and pulled out a pot noodle like he'd found a prize. I was frozen with fear. I didn't know what to do. I remember kind of mumbling something like, "Hey, give it back," that sort of shit. And the member of staff, because it was too cold for them to be bothered to come out into the exercise yard, so a member of staff was in the building, and they knocked on the window, and he put the pot noodle back in the pillowcase that I had and give it back to me. But he kind of mentioned something like, he was going to come and get this back later. Unluckily for someone else, this little gang of lads, they jumped on him and they took his stuff off him. He had two pillowcases full of stuff, and they jumped on him and took his stuff. So the little lesson you can learn from that is, first of all, don't have more stuff than you can defend yourself for. Be aware that when you're getting lots of stuff in prison, you're going to become a target if you can't defend yourself. Prison is a society like anything else, but it's a society full of criminals and crooks and thieves and robbers and muggers and things like this. So just because you're living with them doesn't mean that they're not going to carry on being, thieves. And cell thieves are something that happens as well. You got to keep your door locked and shit, because they will just sneak in there and take stuff. But again, the two things that come from my experience with that canteen is you've got to learn to defend yourself. If someone comes along and takes your shit, you just got to come along and bang them in the mouth straight away. There's no ifs or buts. They've already shots fired by coming and taking your bag. So you've got a green light on them to just bang them in the mouth, punch, kick, fight, scratch, gouge, throat punch, do whatever you've got to do. Start stamping on their head. Just fucking show that that's the hurricane that's going to happen if you think you're going to come and get my shit. Obviously, I did the exact opposite of that. I was the little bitch, and possibly other bullies may have seen that and just green-lighted them or me now to fucking come and get my shit. Later on, a way of obviously being bullied out of stuff as well is a kind of almost like a friendly bully that will come and befriend you, and then just start asking you, oh, have you got a spare phone card? There'll always be an excuse why they couldn't get a phone card themselves, or they need an extra one because a family member or a girlfriend is ill, or they've had an argument and they need to get hold of them or something like this, and they start coming asking for phone cards on a regular basis and food and this and that, and suddenly, because you just don't know how to say no to people, then you start just giving over loads of your stuff, and there's always a promise that they'll give it back or this or that, and again, this happened to me, and at that point in prison, I thought he was one of my pals, but looking back on it, he was just extorting me in a really kind of soft way. And even if if I went back and asked him about it now, he may have even just been a lazy bully. It was just one of those things. Who knows? But fucking later on in life, you just quickly learn. If anybody comes and asks you for anything, you just tell them no. Just look them in the eye and tell them no. Fuck off. Get out of here. I remember one amusing time, because when I was weight training, you've always got to try and get more protein in your body, and used to buy protein shakes and things, and even milk has got a good amount of protein in it. So I'd have loads of milk cartons all in my window, because the window's obviously got bars in it, so you can stack the little rectangle milk cartons up in the window, and it keeps them relatively cold. And this lad come up to me, and he was come to the doorway, and I could see him look over my shoulder and see all the milk in my window, and he asked me, he's like, oh, have you got any milk spare? And I just looked him in the eye and said, no, I haven't got any. Now he knew I could see him, and he kind of just glanced over my shoulder again and saw my window full of milk. And I just kind of put him in a position where he's either got to call me a liar, or he's just got to fuck off. And he chose just to fuck off. So, yeah, the attitude you have to just carry yourself with is a way of not getting picked on. So when I was first in Portland, obviously I was weak. I didn't know how to say no to people. I didn't carry myself in a way probably that made me look like I was going to put up much of a fight. I bumped into that Fitzpatrick again one time coming back from the gym, and we were kind of, the whole gym, it was 2 or 3 gym sessions all in one coming back. So there was, probably a good 60 or 70 lads coming back, and the 2 gym staff don't really kind of watch everything. You'll have one at the front of the crowd and one at the back, closing and opening the gates. And this Fitzpatrick managed to get his hands on me and kind of rough me up a little bit and smack me around with one of his 2 stripes. Again, I was too weak and fucking didn't have any fight in me at that point. Didn't know what I was doing to be able to defend myself. And also, I'd always have it in my ears, because I was on a parole sentence. I'd always have it in my ears that if I got in any trouble, then I might be risking my parole. And that to me at that point was more important than defending myself in prison. You got to remember, this is my first prison sentence. I wasn't even thinking at this point that this is going to be something I was going to keep coming back to. I was fully in my mind thinking that when I got out of prison, that I was never coming back. This wasn't going to be a life for me. Little did I know I'd end up spending most of the next 10 years in prison. So at that point, my parole was more important to me than defending my honour in prison. But bearing in mind, I'm at my first 3 or 4 months at Portland. It's not something you can sustain, just keeping your head down and not reacting. And later on, I'd find out from a probation officer that if I had kicked off and been trouble in those first few months, even up to the first year of your sentence, you can kick off, fight, cause trouble, and then as long as you turn yourself around and start showing promise by the second 6 months and year, then that actually looks much better for you when you're going for your parole. I was actually told by my probation officer that because I'd gone into prison good, gone all the way through my prison without a nicking, without showing a mark on my record. That didn't show any progression. That didn't show any change. So that actually works as a bad mark against you in your parole. So all their advice about not kicking off, it actually held me back. So those you've got your out and out bully like Fitzpatrick, and then you've got the other chap who'll end up just leaning on you like a friendly bully and extorting you. Now, when you get into more serious sort of circles and more serious sort of prisons, B-cats, A-cats, that sort of thing, you need to start just being a bit careful about the paperwork you keep in your cell, and obviously letters and addresses and things. I've been around criminals and circles that, you don't want to keep addresses on your letters. So when your grand's writing to you and things, you rip off the address after you got the letter, and just so that there's nothing in your cell. So imagine one day you come back to your cell and there's a couple of lads there, and they've been through your drawers and they found your mum's address or your grand's address or your girlfriend's address on the outside, and they sit you down and they tell you that you need to do something for them, otherwise someone's going to go around to their house and fucking something bad's going to happen to your family. Now this kind of big boy games happen in prison sometimes when you're knocking around in these kind of big boy circles. Extortion on that kind of level can be you can be told that your girlfriend's got to start bringing stuff into the prison, otherwise something's going to happen. Now that never happened to me, but it happens on a regular basis in jail. It doesn't matter to them, if anything happens to your girlfriend. They're just part of a gang that's bringing stuff in, and if someone gets caught, then they get caught. They just try someone else. So again, one of the ways to not get picked on in that sense is to just make sure that you're not vulnerable in any way, and that you're not making your outside friends or family vulnerable in any way. One of the best things you can always do about keeping yourself out of trouble and not getting picked on is your attitude. Don't fuck around too much. Don't be too friendly with people. It's that whole it's a managerial kind of mindset, as in when you get too familiar with people and you fuck around too much, you got to remember that a lot of people in prison aren't your friends. They aren't pals. They may just be hanging around with you to benefit themselves, or just sometimes just to pass the day. And you push people too far, you joke a little bit too much, and you can end up fighting with people, or like I say, you get too familiar with people, and they start to take the piss a little bit. Then that can cause problems, but also your attitude. Like when I was in prison, when I was first in Portland, I must have looked green as fuck. I must have had this fucking flag waving above my head, as in like, come bully me. I didn't know how to back it up either, so I wasn't able to fight. I wasn't strong enough to be able to fight. Something I would recommend to everyone, if you are looking at prison, or if you fucking ever end up in there, is just get doing press-ups and sit-ups every day. Keep yourself fit. Shadow box in your cell. Learn to throw a punch and how to fight. It's going to be something that you're going to need to do. And even if you don't need to do it, if you just look like you know how to do it, then that may save you a lot of heartache. You never know. If you've had a good time in prison, then that meant a bully didn't pick you for whatever reason. I spent a lot of time hating my life in jail because I was finding it fucking terrifying. Just walking the landings. Didn't want to go on association. You rush in and out of the showers, this sort of thing, because you're constantly afraid of who's going to turn up and what's going to happen. Later on in life, jail became much easier once I stopped giving a fuck, and once I knew how to fight. And once you start punching people in the mouth, then people generally stop picking on you. It's not something that you recommend. It's a dangerous game to play. The escalation of violence is always present. I was always afraid of, when you punch someone in the mouth, are they going to come back with a weapon? Are they going to come back with a tool that cuts you or stabs you? Something like this. You'll see a lot of people in prison walking around with towels around their neck, and sometimes magazines and newspapers shoved down their trousers, protecting their soft midriff. These are all measures that you kind of give yourself a little bit of armour to try and protect yourself from being attacked. It's a scary place, and it can be sometimes quite violent. It's something that you don't want to mess around with. A lot of people end up on the wrong end of things in prison quite quickly from a joke. Talking about people's mothers in prison is a trigger, and it can quickly end up getting yourself in trouble. Don't borrow things. I know this is a bit of a paradox, because I used to sell stuff in prison. I used to sell chocolate and tobacco and stuff like this, but it would get people in a lot of trouble. People borrowing things they can't afford to pay back, and then they find themselves putting themselves on the protection wing quite quickly. And then once you end up going down the protection wing once, you get a reputation of being seen on the nonces wing, so you find it difficult. Debtors you always end up back in prison again at some point, and you're known as a debtor, and you'll find yourself quickly having to put yourself back on protection again and things like this. So just hold yourself with some sort of integrity in prison. It's a far-reaching society, and it'll always end up coming and biting you on the arse again at some point. So again, the best thing I can really recommend is that you never go into prison, but if you do, just hold your head high, act confident, don't be afraid to go monkey crazy on people if you have to, and always pay your debts. Thank you very much for listening, and if you can think of anything else that you want me to talk about, then by all means just mention it in the comments. Say hello if you want me to keep doing these, and if you want me to stop doing them as well, just let me know. Hello Paul, I know you're probably listening. Have a great day. Cheers, man.